Now, you probably look at your bulletins this morning and you see funny drawing on the front of the bulletin this morning. Now, what is that? Well, it's called an eye puzzle. And we were fortunate enough this morning to get a couple of people to be able to see it for the first time. Susan Elliott and Angela Scott were able to see the image within the image. And my angel up there in the loft wanted me to make sure you knew how to see it. So what you do is you put it to your nose and slowly pull it back, and the image should come clear as to what it is. I'm not going to say if you got it fine. The scripture reading today finds Jesus testing the spiritual eyesight of his disciples. When Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" And they say, "Some say, you are John the Baptist." Yeah. Some say, "You are Elias." And others say, "You're Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He saith unto them, "But whom say ye that I am?" See, the disciples had been with Jesus. They saw him. He wanted to know, what's your spiritual eyesight? Talk to me this morning. What do you see? And Simon Peter, not surprised, Peter would be the one, right? Peter answered and said, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered and said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven." The point there is, man can't give you that vision. It's got to come from God. That's the point. You will note 2020 spiritual vision comes from God. My sermon today is entitled Eye Puzzles and Angels. Stated simply, an eye puzzle is an image within an image. Some people can see the image immediately. For some, it's more difficult to see the image, and some, no matter how hard they try, never see the image at all. The question, therefore, is why do we see what we see, and why don't we see what we are supposed to see? If you think about it, all of us are images within an image. There is the physical image, and then there is another part of us that is not visible to the naked eye. What is your image of an angel? Why do you have that particular image? I think that you are beginning to see where I'm going with this, eye puzzles and angels. You could see my eye puzzle there and my eye chart there this morning. Stay with me. I respectfully suggest that your view of people is largely the result of your being conditioned to see what you see when you look at them. This conditioning begins the moment that you are born into this world. Consider the lines from the soundtrack of the musical South Pacific. You've got to be taught to hate and to fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. We see that we've been conditioned, if we think about it. With the help of mirrors and a bit of magic, some of the world's great illusionists can make you believe that you saw an elephant disappear, when in fact it's still standing right in front of you. Why don't you see what you should see? Why can't we see what we are supposed to see? In his book, Race, What Blacks and Whites Think and Feel About the American Obsession, Pulitzer Prize-winning author Studs Terkel relates the following story. There was a white female driving through a largely black community, and she saw the black people on the curb yelling and screaming at her. Hey, hey! So she rolled up her windows, locked her doors, and sped down the street. It wasn't until she got to the end of the street that she realized that she was going the wrong way down the street, and they were trying to warn her and protect her. What did the people see who were trying to warn her? What did she see, and why didn't she see it? A few moments ago, I asked you, what is your image of an angel? There is a wonderful story in the Old Testament, Numbers 22:24. It is a story of Balaam's ass or donkey. Back in the day, they referred to the animal as an ass. To make it short for you, Balaam was a prophet, and King Moab had a kingdom. The Jews were camped outside of his kingdom, and he was afraid the Jews were going to overrun him. So he tried to get Balaam to go curse the Jews so they wouldn't overrun him. So he haggled with Balaam. Balaam said, no, I'm not going to go. Balaam talked to God. Finally, God said, okay, you can go, but you're going to say what I want you to say. You're not going to say what Moab wants you to say. That's not going to work. So Balaam gets on his ass, and he's trotting along, and the donkey just stops. He stops in mid-track, and he won't go forward. No matter what Balaam does, the donkey will not move. So Balaam's beaten the donkey, and it's one of only 2 times in Scripture when animals speak. So God opens the donkey's mouth, and the donkey says to Balaam, hey, why are you beating me? See, the donkey doesn't know that Balaam doesn't see what the donkey sees. The donkey sees an angel standing in his path with a sword. Balaam doesn't see that. Finally, God opens Balaam's eyes, and he sees the donkey. And the angel says to Balaam, why are you beating him? If he had kept coming, I was going to kill you. Whoa. You see, the donkey saw the angel, and the donkey stopped. Now, I don't know about you, but if I saw an angel standing in my path, I'm stopping. It's just that simple. I'm turning around, and especially if he has a sword, I'm out of there. Can't you just hear the donkey saying, you may call me an ass, but I'm no fool. Like that donkey, I too have personally seen an angel. In August of 1999, I had quadruple heart bypass surgery. At that time, I was a member of Broadview Community Church in Hartford, and the pastor was the Reverend Dwight Dutton. And Dwight Dutton had a pair of the biggest blue eyes I'd ever seen. And in order for me to recuperate and recover, I needed a quiet place. But at that time, my home was a daycare. There was no quiet in there, in the home, none. So Pastor Dutton and his lovely wife, Barbara, said, why don't you come and stay with me out in Granby? Excuse me. So I go out to Granby to recuperate. I'm hanging out there, and I get to meet his family. And it's wonderful to be out there in the quiet in Granby. And I still remember Dwight's huge, big, beautiful, compassionate blue eyes. Well, you know, those of you who are in touch with me regularly through this church, you know that I just had my left knee replaced in March. When they rolled me out of the operating room, I was in and out of it like most people. And I opened my eyes and I looked up, and there was a pair of the biggest blue eyes I'd ever seen staring down at me. It was Dwight's daughter. I had no idea where she worked or what she was doing in her life. I chose that facility. Dwight's daughter was staring back at me with those big, beautiful blue eyes. And I knew God had sent an angel to say, James, I got your back, buddy. I got you. There's another angel here this morning, sitting up in the loft doing the video. She gets embarrassed when I call out her name, so I'll just call her Madam Video. She has steadfastly cared for me and nourished me and put up with me, my whining and my crying as my knee heals. That's my angel up there at the video machine. I want you all to know how much I love her. When I came to this church 4 years ago, I was broken and traumatized. Clouds of anxiety dominated my mental skies. My daughter had just committed suicide. What did I see when I walked in here that day? I didn't see a bunch of white people. I saw fellow Christians. I saw angels who gathered around me and nursed me back to health. That's what I saw. What did you see? We just celebrated Mother's Day last Sunday. The country singer Randy Travis sings a song with the lyrics, part of which are these. Are you telling me that you've never seen an angel? Never felt the presence of one standing by? No robe of white, no halo in sight, but you missed the most obvious thing. Man, are you blind? Just look in your mother's eyes. Do you see the angels sitting next to you this morning? Eye puzzles and angels. What do you see when you look at other people? And why do you have that image of them? Why don't you see what you're supposed to see? What did you see on January 6, 2021, when the nation's capital was under attack? Did you see thugs, radicals, social miscreants, or did you see patriots? What did you see when you looked at that? And why did you see what you saw? What do you see when you look at the people at our borders, trying and dying to get into our country? Do you see rapists, murderers, gangbangers, drug dealers, and worse? What do you see when you stare into the eyes of children shadowed with the mascara of misery? What do you see when you look into those eyes? I'll tell you what I saw on January 6, 2021. I saw God's beloved children behaving in a most ungodly way. I saw conduct designed in the darkness of hell demonstrated in broad daylight. I saw the forces of darkness rejoicing at the death and destruction which are the products of their handiwork. I saw thousands of my fellow Americans blinded by lies and fear repudiate Jesus Christ himself. As I watched in stunned silence from the Bible, Job 4:8 came to mind. According to what I have seen, those who plow iniquity and those who sow trouble harvest it. As a Christian, I saw my duty to match their capacity to hate with my capacity to love. I am convinced that the virus of hate is no match for the vaccine of love. I also saw that my Christian duty was to comfort them, not to condemn them. My Christian duty was to confront their violent rage with nonviolent resistance. In short, my duty is to love them as my brethren. A few moments ago, I asked, what do you see, or what did you see when you looked at the people at our borders? Do you see the musicians? Do you see the artists, the writers, the poets, the architects, the teachers, doctors, clergymen and women, the philosophers, dancers, etc.? If you don't see them that way, why not? Do you see them as God's children? We have sent tens of billions of dollars to the people of Ukraine. Don't tell me that there isn't enough money to successfully solve the border problem so that America can reap the benefits of the pools of talent pouring over our borders. Remember, Jesus told us, that which you do to the least among you, you also do unto me. What did Jesus want us to see? And what did Emma Lazarus see when she wrote the lines, Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Eye puzzles and angels, what do you see, and why don't you see it? Here is a message to the despots and the dictators and the demagogues at home and around the world. History has proven time and again what Jesus so eloquently said. Then said Jesus unto him, put up again thy sword in his place, for all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Here is a message to the despots, the dictators, and the demagogues at home and around the world. A lie is still a lie, even if everybody believes it. And the truth is still the truth, even if nobody believes it. What did Julia Ward Howe see when she wrote the lines, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. To the despots, the dictators, and demagogues at home and around the world, hear these lines. Just because your army gives you strength and gives you might, the truth is going to win. Wrong will never conquer right. Every man has a right to think and be free. You are like a spoiled brat. You want everything you see. And you think that your bombs and your guns and your planes make you a big man. When you attack and evade on another man's land, you got to make him be what you want him to be, and make him do what you want him to do, and make him say what you want him to say. It wasn't meant to be that way. We got to tell you, to the despots, the dictators, and the demagogues, there will never be any peace until God is seated at the conference table. There will never be any peace until God is seated at the conference table. And what did John Donne see when he wrote the lines, any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know, for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Many of you are familiar with the following pastor. He lived his life in service to God. He confronted the evil of his time. He spoke out against hatred, violence, racism, and war. He challenged the leaders of his time to move from the darkness into the light. He refused to be silent and spoke often of God's mercy and grace. He was arrested and thrown into prison, and from his cell he wrote letters affirming his belief in God and the goodness of man. He was killed when he was just 39 years old. Y'all know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was born in Poland in 1906. He was a German Lutheran minister. On April 9th, 1945, having been labeled an enemy of the state, he was hanged by the Nazis. But you see, he didn't have to die in Germany. He was free. He was living in England. He was safe and secure. But I could hear Dietrich Bonhoeffer saying to his friends who told him, Dietrich, what are you doing? If you go back there, you know what they're going to do to you. You know what's going to happen to you. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when, if you go back there. And it seems to me that Dietrich Bonhoeffer's Christian vision, his eyesight, was perfect. He said to them, yes, it's wonderful being up here on the mountaintop in England, where the air is fresh and clear and beautiful. It's wonderful being up here. But you see, I'm a Christian. I'm a man of God. I got to go back into the valley where somebody needs me. I've got to go back into the valley. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. But Dietrich, you can write, you can go on the radio. You don't need to be there physically. No, somebody needs hope back in the valley, and I've got to go back and try to give them some hope. His Christian vision was 2020. Pastor Bonhoeffer was focused on his duties as a Christian. He said it's beautiful on the mountain, but I've got to go back to the valley. In his classic book, The Cost of Discipleship, Reverend Bonhoeffer said the following, and pay attention to this: the messengers of Jesus will be hated till the end of time. They will be blamed for all the divisions which rend cities and homes. Jesus and his disciples will be condemned on all sides for undermining family life and for leading the nation astray. They will be called crazy fanatics and disturbers of the peace. The disciples will be sorely tempted to desert their Lord, but the end is also near, and they must hold on and persevere until it comes. Only he will be blessed who remains loyal to Jesus and his word until the end. Pastor Bonhoeffer left us these words: the cross is laid on every Christian. The first Christ suffering, which every man must experience, is the call to abandon the attachments of this world. It is that dying of the old man, which is the result of his encounter with Christ. As we embark upon discipleship, we surrender ourselves to Christ in union with his death, give over our own lives. Thus it begins. The cross is not the terrible end to an otherwise God-fearing and happy life, but it meets us at the beginning of our communion with Christ. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come to die. This is what Dietrich Bonhoeffer left to us. It seems to me that I can hear his voice echoing down through the decades when he said, the will of God, to which the law gives expression, is that men should defeat their enemies by loving them. Pastor Bonhoeffer reminded us, we are not simply to bandage the wounds of victims beneath the wheels of justice. We are to drive a spoke in the wheel itself. Pastor Bonhoeffer told us, judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others, we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as we are. Pastor Chris and Pastor Jennifer are messengers of God. If you will, they are God's optometrists. They help keep us focused on our Christian responsibilities. Sometimes we heed their message, and sometimes we don't. But I say unto you this morning, if Pastor Chris and Pastor Jennifer could not call out the lies and the liars that have us blind and separated from God and each other, the stones that Pastor Jennifer talked about 2 weeks ago, those stones would cry out if Pastor Jennifer and Pastor Chris couldn't do that. If Pastor Jennifer and Pastor Chris could not call out hatred dressed in the garments of love, the very stones would cry it out. If Pastor Chris and Pastor Jennifer could not call out racism disguised as patriotism, the very stones would cry it out. If Pastor Chris and Pastor Jennifer could not call out the evil in an economic system that rewards the greedy and decimates the needy, the very stones will cry it out. If Pastor Chris and Pastor Jennifer could not call out the insanity and the horror of the weapons of mass destruction responsible for killing our babies in schools, killing our citizens at home, killing our citizens at work, killing our citizens at play, killing our citizens at worship, killing our citizens at concerts and gatherings of all kinds, killing our citizens on public transportation, if they could not call out that madness, the very stones will cry out. We are quick to assert our constitutional rights, but we are slow to acknowledge our collective wrongs. I suffer from a deadly disease. I'm going to out myself this morning. As I look at the world, I see that millions of my fellow Christians suffer from the same ailment. As with many illnesses, I brought this illness upon myself. You may have heard of it. It's called the CC disease. The CC stands for Christian Cataracts. My Christian vision gets cloudy when I'm arrogant. My Christian vision gets selfish. My Christian vision gets cloudy when I'm selfish. It gets cloudy when I'm greedy. It gets cloudy and hard to see my role as a Christian when I'm hate-filled. It gets cloudy when I'm spiteful. It gets cloudy when I'm resentful. It gets cloudy when I'm unforgiving and angry. It gets cloudy when I lie to God, to myself, and others. I come back to the inescapable realization that the sun doesn't need my permission to rise, and the moon doesn't know my name. You see, it's not about me as a Christian. It's not about me. So let me close this morning with some advice. 2,000 years ago, a man from Galilee gave the world a prescription for correcting Christian cataracts. That prescription is as effective today as it was then. It reads something like this: You are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and you are to love your neighbor as yourself. We are also told by Micah to do justly, to love mercy, and walk humbly with God. That is what is required of us. In case you don't know, think about this. You are not an American first. You are a Christian first. You are not a black person first. You're a Christian first. You are not a white person first. You are a Christian first. You're not a Republican first. You're a Christian first. You're not a conservative first. You're a Christian first. You're not a Democrat first. You're a Christian first. You're not a liberal first. You're a Christian first. You're not an LGBT plus person first. You're a Christian first. You are not pro-life first. You're a Christian first. You are not pro-choice first. You're a Christian first. That is the focus that we must maintain as we navigate this journey. If I can show someone he's traveling wrong, or lift someone with a word or a song, then my living will not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought and spread the message as the Master taught, then my living will not be in vain. I can see clearly now. The rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. Gone are the dark clouds that had me blind. It's going to be a bright, sunshiny day. Dear Lord, help us to see you more clearly. Help us to love you more dearly and follow you more nearly day by day. Eye puzzles and angels, when viewed through the proper lenses, they are really not that hard to see. Thank you. Amen.